Hello and welcome to tutorial 217. In this tutorial we're going to be creating a form, and on that form we're going to be drawing buttons, creating buttons for all the color objects in TradeStation. So you can see we have the form here, we have the buttons applied. Each of them is one of the color object colors, and what I've done is added the name on the little buttons as well. And then furthermore, if we were to click on a particular button, for example, fire brick, you'll see that the name of that color appears on this label, and over here we have a little bit more information about the RGB values of that color. And then I've just made the back of the form that color, and the same, we click on another color and those values change and the back of the color form changes. So let's quickly go through the program. Let me show you what I've done. I'm just going to close that for the moment. So slowly what I'll do is come back to some of these methods. As always, you will be able to download this for a small fee, or if you prefer you can copy it in as we go through it. First of all, the one statement. What we're doing here is creating two vectors: the color vector, which is going to store the color names, in other words the strings, and button vector, which is going to store the buttons. First of all, we added to the color vector using .push_back all the names of the color objects in TradeStation. So we did that, we went through all of those. Then having done that, we created a form using color form equals new form. Now, you may not be super familiar with this syntax, and you could either copy and paste what I've got here, or what you could do, if you right click on your the area where you're programming and say add form, you'll see that it creates a form and it shows you all the various values that you can control in that form. For example, you could decide, okay, the back color, I want this to be a red color. And what you then might say, well, I want to know what is the syntax to add some labels. So if we went to view, toolbox, and then we could just find the label, add those to the form, and then you can also see the values that we can change for those labels. And now if you were to go to the designer generated code, you would see all the code that you have just generated. So that is one way of getting the syntax, but we're not going to do that right now. I'm just going to right click, I'm going to remove the form, and now you'll see that the designer generated code is empty again. So let's go through what we did in this tutorial. As I say, we created the values of the colors in a vector, then we created a form, and then we set a few elements of the form, like for example its name, the original color that it's going to be in the background, padding, font used, and we used colorform.show. And then for our labels, we created two labels. We haven't really got too much useful information in them at the moment, but label 1, label 2, and we gave them initial positions. We'll be changing those in a moment, so don't need to think about that too much. But what we then did is we looped through the color vector, which has got all the names of the colors, and in each case we created a new button. We set the back color to the color. Now, since we're using strings in the vector, we need to convert that into the color object, and we did that using color.fromName, and then we put the name as a string, and then we set the for color, and then we created the initial position. Then having done that, what we want to do is we want to do 10 buttons in a row. Then we need to go to a new row, 10 buttons, 10 columns, then a new row, etc. And we do that in this little area here. We add the button to the form. We also add the new button text and set the font, make it visible, etc. And then you'll notice also that we could click on a button and that would have an effect. So we need to set up an event. So the button has been stored in this vector. So we could say button vector counter as type button dot mouse click, and that then creates this event here. Then when we've created all the colored buttons, we want to add we want to reposition our two labels to make them just beyond where the color buttons are, and we do that using this 50 times row plus a half, and you'll see that that gets them approximately where we want them. Now, one thing I just skipped over there is we've got the back color for the button, but we've also got a fore color, and that's going to be effectively for the writing. And you'll notice if we just go back and look at the form again, is that the writing for these buttons varies. For example, some of them we've got black writing, and some of them we've got white writing, and that is to do with the contrast. So I deliberately decided to do this based on contrast, and in this program we're making that decision based on the high contrast color method, which I've included. So let's just have a look at that while we're discussing this. If we just go to the top of the program, you see we've got the namespaces, the variables. Then we've got the event, the new button mouse click, which happens when a particular button is clicked. And then we've got this high contrast color, and what it does, it basically takes the color, so for example black, it converts that into RGB, and then it uses this formula here, relative luminance simplified, and it just basically does a calculation, and it says if that value is greater than 128, then we want to use black, otherwise we want to use white, and it returns that color and uses that to draw the text. So that is the where we draw all the buttons. I mentioned already that we had an event which is set up in this area here. So what that does, let's just go back up to the top, sorry to keep moving backwards and forwards, but that is this event here. What we do is we go through every single button and we set a value of clicked button to each button in turn, and then we say if the sender, in other words the one that the system is picking up being clicked, is equal to clicked button, we now know what the clicked button is. What we can do is then reset the label 1 text to be equal to the clicked button back color, and we can set label 2 text to be the legacy color from color object of the button that's being clicked, and that is another method which we'll look at in a moment. And then just the color form, we set the back color to the back color of the clicked button. So let's have a look at this other method here, legacy color from color object, and essentially all this does is it just provides or returns some text describing the color, and it does that through converting it in various ways. For example, color int, that uses RGB for the color components to return an RGB color, and then we have that those values provided separately. Incidentally, this is a string, so RGB color has a 32-bit integer. And then we return that value, and actually we use that value for the labels. Then apart from all of that, as I mentioned, we also have the namespaces, variables, and I've added a little bit of commentary at the top. So hopefully you will find that useful, and I will, as I say, make this available, and otherwise you're welcome to use any of the parts of it to recreate a similar program. And thank you very much for your attention.